HDR in this game is really a big mess. I mean, at least it is working somehow on the Xbox Series compared to the PlayStation 5 version, because without my provided temporary fix, you have a terrible HDR experience on the PlayStation 5. I mean, it's actually unplayable, but even on the Xbox Series version, HDR is not working as it should be. Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. So let me make one thing very clear. Right now, when I recorded this game, HDR on both consoles is actually broken. So on the PlayStation 5 it's terrible broken, and yeah, without my fix it's unplayable. And here on the Xbox Series, at least in the standard setting, it is more or less okay, but still there's something terrible wrong. And that's why I made this video, because I don't know actually when they are going to provide a patch for this. It can take maybe just a couple of hours, maybe days, or maybe weeks or months, or maybe never. That's why I think it is a good idea to have at least a temporary solution until hopefully this gets fixed. So let's start with the very important thing. Jedi on the Xbox supports the HDR system level calibration, but there is a big problem, because if you have set up this menu or the settings here in the correct way, and I have done this for my LG G2, so that means I would actually expect a maximum peak brightness in the game of around 1000 nits. But the problem, that's not the case. The maximum peak brightness with the correct settings in the HDR system level menu is just around 600 nits. And forget about the brightness setting in the game or the HDR settings in the game, because they are not really changing anything in terms of the maximum peak brightness. The only way where we can have actually more peak brightness and specular highlights is when we increasing the HDR system level settings on the Xbox. And because this is just a temporary solution, I am doing more or less the same thing what I have done with the PlayStation 5 version. There's just one very important difference. So we're talking about this menu here, HDR Calibration Menu on the Xbox Series. So the first screen, do not touch it. Make sure this is set to 0, because this is the HDR black level setting for the game, and it actually works just perfectly. What we have to do is the two following screens, where you can set up the maximum peak brightness in specular highlights or for the screen on its own. We are going to increase this to the maximum. And if you don't know what the maximum is, when you press the 4 shoulder buttons on your Xbox controller, you get actually this little screen on the top left, top right side, sorry, and you can see exactly what you have set up. So make sure that the setting looks exactly as you can see here: 0, 10,000 and 10,000. And when you have done this, then please start the game and look for the HDR in-game settings. And what we're doing now is we leave the HDR brightness as it is for now, because remember, this is just a temporary solution. But what I would recommend is actually change the HDR black point setting to 25. But please keep in mind that my recommended settings for now, I have tested this on my TVs, the LG G2 and the LG CX, and I found this is right now a very good compromise. It's not the best in terms of HDR settings, but for now, as a temporary solution, I think it's okay. And it's very interesting to see that after we change the maximum peak brightness in the HDR system level calibration to the maximum, we have now suddenly a maximum peak brightness and specular highlights of around 2000 nits. Of course, 2000 nits is a little bit too much for LG CX or LG G2, but that's how it is at the moment. So I think that's the best compromise what we can do right now. I would recommend, because we have a very high peak brightness and specular highlights, to use dynamic tone mapping off until there's a proper fix and we can use HDRG or dynamic tone mapping on. Because if there is a very high peak brightness in specular highlights, your TV most likely can't handle it, because the LG CX maximum peak brightness is around 700-800 candela. That means you have a lot of clipping in specular highlights. That's why dynamic tone mapping off will give you a much better experience than HDRG or dynamic tone mapping on. And of course you can play this game in Dolby Vision on the Xbox Series, but believe me, there is not really an advantage over HDR10. Okay, my friends, so that's it for this very quick video, and I'm not happy at all because, yeah, HDR is not working on the consoles or on the PC maybe as well. So at least, let's say like this, even without changing the HDR system level calibration on the Xbox, HDR will work without having a very bad experience as on the PlayStation 5, but still not the best outcome. I think my temporary fix for the Xbox version will gives you a little bit more of punch to the picture. But again, keep in mind, this is really just a temporary solution. As soon they fix the issue with HDR, I will provide proper settings.